We're right back to it. Right back on the horse. The cowboy known as Sonic Weekly. That's the podcast that you have returned to, your favorite show about Sonic the Hedgehog, unofficial, unauthorized, sometimes unnerving. Here we are. Big show, big show. You've seen the headline. You know who's here. You know what we're going to talk about before we know what we're going to talk about. I'm Grant, one of your hosts. Along back with the show is Bo. Hey, Bo.
Hey, speed me up. This podcast is not produced by or under license from Sega, and everything we say is endorsed by Paramount, though. So take that to the bank.
That is not true. That is also covered under parody law, should any lawyers be listening. And the star of the show, out of the shadows and into the spotlight, David the Lurker. Hi, David.
Whoa, hi Grant, hi Bo. That's right. We are not endorsed or licensed by any organization, public, private, large, or small. I've never even seen the stock market in person. That's how off the grid I am. Well, not too off the grid. I've paid taxes.
Sure. We should clarify that Manscaped has reached out to us to sponsor, but we declined. We are a sponsorless show. We are artistic integrity, and we have 3 artists with us today. So let's not bury the lead any further and talk to, returning to the show, previously came on to talk about Mortal Kombat. It's Pat Casey. Hi, Pat.
Hey, Grant, everybody. Good to be back, even though we're not talking about Mortal Kombat today, which is what I'd really prefer to be talking about yet again.
We'll see what happens.
You know I could go on and on about it.
Right, we didn't talk about the sequel. We need to get to it.
Yes.
Annihilation.
And for the first time on the show, very excited to have him, Josh Miller, co-writer also.
Hello.
Hello.
Happy to be here.
Josh Worm Miller, also known as.
Yes. Way back when.
High school nickname, then a credit, then forever a podcast question. Now just like a podcast asterisk. Might even be edited out. We'll see.
That's when you know you're a deep Josh Miller fan.
Yes.
Or my older brothers.
And producer of the film, artist and producer, right? Tyson Hesse.
Co-producer is technically my credit.
We consider him the secret weapon of the franchise.
Absolutely.
It's a weird credit because my job is weird.
Right.
Maybe we'll get into that later.
I looked at, you're the only one, Tyson, with a picture on Wikipedia. Both Pat and Josh, you're pictureless, you're anonymous, but Tyson,
what?
You are there. Yeah.
Well, now I gotta look because I hate almost every picture that is usually found.
Is there really not a picture of us, Pat?
No.
Holy
I
shit.
do know that for a while when you Googled me, like a little bio for me showed up, but with a picture of some completely other guy making a really ridiculous, like ugly on purpose face. And I was like, why is this my picture to the internet?
Now I want to see this picture of Tyson now that he just yelled, holy shit.
I look like an utter crackhead in this picture.
No, this is very flattering. Every photo of you, you're all 3 very photogenic gentlemen for being behind the scenes artists and crew.
I look like there's a proctologist under the table giving me exams. Like,
Is that not what was happening?
Terrible.
Dear listener, please get on this. Please contact your nearest Wikipedia editor to get this rectified.
Wait, I can't see Tyson's picture. What's going on?
You don't see it?
On his wiki?
No.
I see it.
Okay, so to awkwardly transition to talking about the Sonic movies, I did want to tell you.
No, I only want to talk about IMDb photos and whether or not we can see them.
Right.
That recently so actually, let's mention this right up front, which is this, you're listening to, the movie is out in theaters, dear listener. You know this. You have seen the movie, perhaps. We are recording this before the movie has come out on the 9th of December, in fact. So 2 trailers have come out, a whole bunch of TV spots. If there is a 3rd trailer, that has not yet released. So we are working with that amount of information. But we're not going to talk about the 3rd movie, obviously. We're going to talk about the movie Trilogy. You have made 3 Sonic films. Who could have imagined that? There's a Sonic trilogy. And recently for the holidays, for Thanksgiving, my mom came to LA and she hadn't seen the Sonic movies. So I was like, oh, we should watch. So we watched them and it was fun to sort of see it through her eyes as well. She doesn't know Sonic, but they're family movies. But I forgot also how the first movie opens with Long Claw, and her review after the first 5 minutes was like, Jesus Christ, this movie's going to make me cry. I was like, oh, it lightens up, but really excited to talk about all 3 movies. So let's assume maybe that the listener, they're probably deep into the Sonic movie lore. They're deep fans of everybody, but let's talk about the timeline of events. So Tyson was the first person of the 3 of you to be involved in the Sonic franchise overall, with the comics, the Archie comics being, I think, the first introduction between Sonic and Tyson. Is that right?
Yeah. just started with a couple of covers. They went well enough, so I asked to do some interiors. Little by little, kept getting drawn into more things.
Yeah, Sonic Mania, the intro to and the Sonic Mania Adventures, Team Sonic, the Sega shorts.
Yeah.
And then the movie, Pat and Josh, we know, you guys have talked about this before too. There were previous writers that were attached to the Sonic film. You came in with a different take. And I think you guys have talked about this before, but really curious too of like, how many different versions of that first movie were you coming into those early pitch meetings with? When you get the sort of, okay, they're looking for takes on Sonic, did you know immediately road trip? Were you considering other options?
No, I mean, our version that we pitched and then we had to do 1,000 pitches of working our way up to ladder. They didn't do that. And Jeff Fowler, the director, got hired at the same time as us. And he had his own pitch. And we also didn't really do that. It was only one we all got together. We sort of mushed elements together, but really we kind of started from scratch once the team was assembled and we were all stuck in a room together up on the dry erase board. And then we went through 5,000 versions of that over the first 2 weeks we had to work with.
But we always knew that the one thing every Sonic fan wanted to see was Sonic sitting in the passenger seat of a car, passively riding. But that was really the thing, is like the road trip part. I feel like it's a little overblown. They don't spend that much time in the car. But it was always like the brief from the American studio was always going to be that Sonic has to be friends with a human, so it's
and
sort
it
of
had to take place on Earth.
Yeah.
And Sega, a lot of people ask us if we had to go, because you get hired on like a Marvel movie and they give you like this 10-foot high stack of lore you have to go through and consult with the team. Sega had very few things that they really felt were kind of had to happen or couldn't happen. And one of those, though, was that Sonic is not from Earth. So that was the kind of task we were all given right off the bat, that it had to be on Earth. Sonic can't be on Earth. So we're like, well, I guess he's an alien. How does he get here? What is that?
Discuss of maybe there's a hidden place on Earth where the animals can talk, and that's where Sonic's from. And Sega's we love that, but no, you can't do it. That's against the rules.
They definitely insisted that it was two worlds, which is like a Sonic fan thing, like an argument for a long time of is there two worlds? Is it one world? And Tyson, I don't know if you're...
Yeah, well, so I'm on, there's an internal team of people that watch over the lore inside Sega, and I'm one of those members. And while we don't have nearly the ironclad grip on what actually goes out the door that some people may think, one of the things that we did talk about when the group was first formed was, is Sonic's world different from the world that humans are on? Because some of the games take place in worlds where there are humans, and some of them take place where you don't see a single human. So are those different worlds? Are they different parts of the same world? It had been previously stated and also internally thought that Sonic's world was different from the human world, but between the games, a story that was never told was that Sonic was going through portals to go to the human world and then coming back through the portal to go to his world. And it's just something that was never communicated to the audience. So the audience didn't understand what was happening. Especially strange that the floating island was conveniently going between worlds as well. The Chaos Emeralds. Everyone just packed everything important plot-wise into a box. They pushed it through a portal, and then they're on that world. So one of the things that we were tasked to handle was clarifying that, and it was determined internally that there is just one world, and the reason why you don't see certain things sometimes is just because they're in different parts of the world.
Like the real world.
So that happened after the first movie was obviously put to task. So
in his world, compromise does exist.
Wait, Tyson, when did you join this lore council?
Right, it was assembled after the first movie, as you were just saying.
Or just the first movie was already in motion?
Yes, first movie was already out. But before that time, there was already a group internally a group of people that were not classified as such, but we were kind of asked what we thought about everything. So before something went out the door, we were, the voice of the fans. We know what people want, what they think, and we're not necessarily tasked to just get what we want, but we have to put on the table, okay, we like this, but the fans like this. And internally, everyone, including, everyone at Sega that makes those calls, take all that information in, and then collectively we come up with decisions on what to happen. Yeah, that was started probably back in the Mania days. Honestly, we kind of started having those discussions, and it wasn't till after the movie that if we brought in more people from wider varieties and walks of life and all that stuff to have more diverse voices in the room. That didn't happen until like right before movie 2, I think.
Oh.
But you are saying that like they had determined, they told us the rules were that it's 2 worlds.
Yeah.
And then we came out with a movie establishing forever that it is in fact 2 worlds. And then everybody got their heads together and they were like, you know what? It's 1 world. That's how it went down.
Basically, yeah, that's how it went. I guess. I mean, there are certain things lore-wise which have always been intentionally or unintentionally left vague, including the fate of the moon after Sonic Adventure 2. There have always been kind of off-the-cuff answers given at conventions that were not necessarily intended to be taken as ironclad. Like Izuka once gave an answer that the moon just turned around, and that's why you don't see the broken part anymore. It was not a serious reply, but because it's the only answer that we were ever given, everyone took it as, okay, I guess the moon just turned around. So there's a lot of, quote unquote, like hanging chads, if you will, in the lore that we were tasked to, internally give our own thoughts on, but also say, what do the fans want? What do we think they will receive positively? It's ultimately a loser's game because you can't change anything without somebody getting upset. Like whenever you have loose lore rules or loose lore history like that, people are internally creating their own stories and trying to make the puzzles work inside their head. And so as soon as anything official comes out that says to the contrary of that, they're going to be upset, like some people will be overjoyed because that's how they saw it. For example, like a lot of people never got the 2 world thing. There are people that did like the 2 world thing, and so that's where it becomes kind of a difficult situation is if you have to make a decision, you're going to upset someone. And we're kind of a little bit of a cannon fodder, I think, in that respect. I think people think that we're the ones that are the end all be all of all these decisions, and it's not necessarily. It's not the case at all.
Cannon fodder. I see what you did there.
It's funny too because I remember when the 2 worlds thing was a convention answer, arguing on the Sonic retro boards of like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But now after seeing the movies, I'm like, oh, it makes sense. I actually do get it. And that's like both kind of, and it's like the Tails tube is clarified. It's like the animals are on the islands, the humans are on the continents. Like that makes perfect sense. That's what I was rolling with. That's what I was arguing for on the retro boards.
Right.
But now if it was like actually on second thought, there's 2 worlds. I'd be like, that makes sense too. Because the movies they go through the rings all the time. In the Sonic Mania intro, they're going through the rings.
Right.
But I was going to bring up Archie Comics, but I'm not going to open up that door.
Yeah, like the 2 worlds thing absolutely could work. The problem is that it was never told to the audience that that's what was happening.
Right.
And a few things like, again, the floating island just kind of going with them through a portal of some kind of
yes.
undetermined size and origin. It's just there are ways to clear it up, but ultimately it was determined by all vested parties that let's just make it 1 world so that Sonic's adventures that he's had in the past are known and part of the world's history going forward, so that if we want to have an adventure, that just has animal characters or whatever, the events that happened on the human world are known to these people. It's part of a continual timeline and not something that necessarily is divvied up like that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Oh, no. I was just going right. And then I was going to make a joke. I was going to say, well, Sonic 4 isn't out yet. You can still retcon it. So the beginning of Sonic 1 was just somewhere in the Pacific. Aha. And then,
I do think it's fun that you're bringing up a theme that I was hoping that we would get to, which is how collaborative, I think my understanding these projects are. They're more organic and less, they're not as figured out as fans maybe imagine that they are. It doesn't seem like, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that there's like a 10-year plan that you guys have been following each step of the way. Maybe that is true. Maybe maybe it's going exactly according to plan because it has been going perfectly. Like you couldn't script, maybe you could script it to go quite this well. I guess you did literally script it to go.
Yeah, we're Hollywood
quite this
screenwriters.
well.
We can script anything, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say with these first three, well, more so with 2 and 3, we're at least, we kind of knew which, or at least at the end of one of the movies, with like the post-credit tease, it was kind of like, all right, so the next movie is kind of going to be about, like, we knew Sonic 2 was going to be, obviously Tails is here, and there was going to be Knuckles showing up. Sonic and Knuckles, the game, doesn't have a ton of story, but it has the building blocks of a pretty basic arc. And then
by the time Sonic 1 came out, we knew Sonic 2 was going to be Robotnik and Knuckles were going to team up, and then Knuckles was going to switch sides in the end. Spoiler alert.
And then Sonic 3 being kind of the first one drawing from the source material, where now we were drawing from a game that had like a ton of story.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Like during Sonic 2, did you know Shadow's story would be the next one, or was that at the end?
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember at what point, it's obviously above all three of our pay grades here. But I feel like that came up again as kind of the next obvious thing. Like we all know there's a certain set of characters that are getting checked off with the franchise that people are most excited about. And I think the powers that be felt.
Obviously, there are a couple of other characters it could have been, but it was sort of handed down. That was like Shadow. People love Shadow. It's going to be Shadow. We'll do Shadow for part 3. We're like, okay, boss.
I knew that you made the right choice because I was in the theater, a group of kids behind me. The post-credit scene comes up, and all the kids at the same time whisper Shadow.
Yeah, like part of the thought process that goes into the decision making on stuff like that is it has to be like one who has the best storytelling potential. Obviously, Shadow is a perfect choice for that. He has inarguably one of the best stories, in the entire history of the franchise. But also, it's got to be someone that enough people know to get excited about. So there's a core group of Sonic characters that are well known enough to get anyone screaming, and then there's characters that would get fans screaming. But even 3 movies into a franchise, that's still pretty early for how far we want to go. We want to keep making more and more of these. So you have to keep that steam up. You have to get the big hitters into the game so you can use them. And you want to keep people screaming and not have an end of a movie where, fans are cheering, but everyone else is like, big? Who? So Shadow is an obvious choice for that reason.
So there's a 10-year plan in place. This is going to be the defining franchise of the 2020s.
We're just like George Lucas and planned them all out.
The 10-year plan is I hope we can keep making more movies, but it's
right.
It's interesting too, but I'm sorry, David.
Sorry.
I knew it.
It was happening.
You go.
Well, no, because you're talking and you were saying like, oh, while working on Sonic 2, you had a sense, like Shadow's going to be the next one. Like when you came together and decided, okay, we're throwing Shadow at the end as the teaser, here we go. Like, is that just naturally happening within the people at Paramount, or is Sega whispering in your ear and saying, hey, the first one went well, second one looks well, you really should get Shadow in here? Because they went ahead, like this year was just the year of Shadow. Is it just you went, here we go, Shadow?
I think Tyson can answer better than that.
Yeah. I mean, Sega definitely does a lot of whispering across every step of the way. I will say, like, the year of Shadow, that was more of Shadow's going to be in the movie. Let's do a year of Shadow. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really the other way around. Like,
Sega knew this movie was coming. It wasn't a surprise to them. It was like, oh, Shadow's gonna be in part 3. And, like they get to learn that ahead of time.
I thought they only found out like 2 weeks ago.
But they are. They pay for half the movie. They're co-funders of the entire thing, so they are not just gonna be quiet when they have a thought or an idea. They're partners in the process. So. They are making their wishes on what they think the best direction to go is at frequent intervals.
Did the success of the first 2 raise ambitions for the third one, or is it you've always been going big?
I mean, I think inevitably they're going to keep getting bigger, but I mean, also, yes, I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, the vibe on each one has been a little different, at least. And Tyson, that can speak to his phase of the movie. We're obviously just at the kind of very beginning when it's just 4 people was sitting in a room. Now it's always over Zooms, which is a little bit less exciting. But like the first movie was so weird because we had so little time to put it together, but also it felt like, and that was when it was at Sony before it moved to Paramount. And I want to say Sony didn't care, but like it felt, like the world didn't know what was happening yet. It hadn't been announced. The project had already kind of gone into a bit of turnaround because, as you'd noted already, there was a whole other version of the movie that they scrapped and started over, and that was when Pat and I came in. So then, in some ways, it felt to us as the people in this room making it that we were the only ones who really thought the movie could be super cool.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was kind of, I think it was surprised a lot of people when the movie turned out good and did really well. So then 2, you could feel that everyone was like, ah, shit, like we only get one gimme, because there were so many reviews of the first one where the viewer was just like, I can't believe this wasn't horrible. We're like, well, we're not going to get that again. But then people like loved 2 even more than 1. So I think weirdly, then that puts even more pressure. And as we've kind of been saying, the third one was finally the first one that had lore that we all felt like we could fuck up and piss people off. I think as long as like, Knuckles like seemed cool and was a badass and people would like that it was following the story where Robotnik's kind of tricking him, but he's good deep down. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of lore that we all felt like we really, really had to stick to on 2.
The Chaos Emeralds were a big thing, and they still are a talking point about, how to treat them in the movieverse and how we ended up with them being inside the Master Emerald. It's like, we knew that, Knuckles can't be the guardian of the Chaos Emeralds. He has to be the guardian of the Master Emerald. It's just like, it might seem like a semantic thing to a lot of people, but that's just his deal. And so we needed this to be a story about the Master Emerald, but we also wanted to do Supersonic. And so there was lots of ideas tossed around, like, do we need the Chaos Emeralds at all? Can Sonic go super from the Master Emerald? Like, is that enough? Like, we don't want to have a MacGuffin hunt for 8 different things in this movie. That's just like structurally unwieldy. And like, this was coming right off of Avengers Infinity War, and it would just be like feel so derivative. But also, it's like how many vignettes of going to different places and collecting emeralds can we do? The movie would be 4 hours long. Yeah. So that was a continual talking point. I mean, I don't think we really settled on an actual answer until maybe even after filming was done. It was constantly in flux. We changed it a bunch of times in the boards. And I don't remember whose idea it was. It might have been me or Jeff, or it might have been you guys. I really don't know who came up with it. But the idea is just to like put them together. The Master Emerald forms around it. And then if we need to have them in play, they can come out.
I don't remember. I mean, I definitely remember during the initial writing phase. And a lot of this, again, just feels so above Pat and I's pay grade. And I kind of feel like part of our job is not to be masters of the lore.
Right.
We're just kind of like, we're just trying to figure out how to put it into a movie. So I feel like every other week, Toby or Jeff would come back with some update of what Sega was like into or was going to allow or not allow. And we're like, okay. And then kind of having like 5 billion different ideas you could possibly do. But it is funny what Tyson was saying. All the flashback stuff on all the movies have changed super wildly, like first in the script phase, and it changes constantly by the time we're done, and then it changes during production, and then they shoot the movie, and then it keeps changing, and then finally the finished version, is like, and in some ways maybe that's the best way to do it, because you're at that point you're really seeing what the movie is and what you want the backstory to be.
Yeah, and it's really crazy. Like, I was not involved in movies until the first one. I've been in TV plenty of time, but it is really surprising every time now, even on the third one, how different something is once it hits the screen. Like, it'll look perfect on paper. It'll read great. It'll work great in the board. Every sequence when in isolation works great. And then you put it all into a movie and you're like, oh my God, this doesn't work at all. You have to pivot. And then luckily, because these movies are so animated, like animation doesn't start until much later in the process. Like animation doesn't really start until filming is completely done. What we can do is then we can prioritize what gets hit first. You know, like this sequence isn't going to change. We're pretty confident in this one. Get that one started. Hold off on this one. We're doing some thinking work. But because the animation process, like animation proper, doesn't really start getting finished until like the last 2 months before release. I think a lot of people think that this stuff happens and then it kind of sits there and waits to come out. But it's really like primary animation is really only like you'll get your first final shot like 2 months before release, and that'll be one. You know,
I was gonna say, is the movie's 100% done now at the time we're recording this?
Yes,
or
this one is done now.
Okay.
But on Sonic 2, and this is documented. You know, people know about it. The first version that went out had some unfinished shots in it.
Yeah, the international version, because it opened a week before it did here in America.
They were working on that movie until a couple weeks after the international release. It's not uncommon. It's not unheard of. It happens with Marvel movies. It infamously happened with Cats, you know.
On Cats, you could tell, though.
It's not something you want to happen for all parties involved. Everyone has things to move on to, and budgets, you know, only stretch so far. But Sonic 2 is also a special case where post-pandemic, everyone had kind of hit the brakes on their projects. And so a lot of the VFX workers moved on to other stuff like games or TV shows, animation that was still running. And then as soon as COVID restrictions were lifted, it was like everyone hit the gas at the exact same time. So suddenly all these projects that were sitting on the shelf were like raring to go. And everyone had papers that said, well, you said you'd have it by this date. And I know things were different, but now they're the same because we said so. And so the VFX industry was really hit hard during that time. Everyone did truly the best they could given the situation, but it was really just like way too much work across the industry with timeframes not shifting to accommodate for it. So Sonic 2 is an exception. Like Sonic 1, obviously we had the original delay that allowed for everything to be finished like right on time. And then 3, we were comfortably finished right on time. So
I was going to ask. So in the first one, you had to redo the character model. In the second one, you have pandemic to deal with. Third one, you have work stoppages and such. So are you like ready for a normal one like before?
I have no idea what that looks like at this point. I mean, it's a testament to, you know, Jeff and the other producers that these things still manage to go off without a hitch.
Yeah, we always hit the date.
Yeah, they always
or at least on 2 and 3. 1 got pushed back.
Yeah, I do want to keep talking about the script storyboard process that you were getting onto, but really quickly back to the Master Emerald, the solution that you guys found to that. As a fan, like I practically got out of my seat and like was applauding the screen. I was so happy with the way that the movie resolved that problem, and also with the end of it too, with like the Team Sonic sharing the bird, because there's no Angel Island, so it like doesn't make sense for Knuckles to go off on his own. Cass talks about, you guys have talked about this before in previous interviews, but like it's such a beautiful ending to the movie, and it also works for like the deep Sonic fan where it's like, fuck yeah, that is like the happy ending that like Knuckles kind of deserves on some level. Actually, I kind of want to go back to the first movie as well, because the first movie, you know, you're just talking about the character design change. You know, as the franchise goes along, you know, there's more lore to pull from. There's more games, I guess, to more closely adapt. But that first movie is really interesting. There's a lot of your individual creative artistry on display with the character design, but also I want to talk about the script with Sonic and Robotnik having motivations that we had not seen as fans before. We had not seen Sonic experience really maybe outside of some Archie comic issues, maybe some, you could point to like Saturday morning cartoon, but like, you know, the feelings of loneliness, isolation, grief he's going through, jealousy even. So tell us about that process of deciding to make that Sonic was going to be the kid, the focal point, and then how you've identified Sonic's arc in the second and third film.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was weird because when it was at Sony, our exec there at the time, the one cool thing she said to us was she just didn't want it to be like a kid's movie. If we actually kind of all felt it was going to be like PG-13, kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy or Ant-Man. I mean, still a family-friendly movie, but aged up a little bit. And I think that's actually how like Pat and I got hired, and why Tim Miller was there and Jeff even got hired, was they were trying to do that kind of like James Gunn sort of hire, rather than get somebody known or people known for doing kids movies.
Yeah, that's Sony exec. I think when we won her over with our pitch was when we got to the part like, and then he gets in a giant bar brawl, and she was like, "I love it."
But it was weird because, you know, I mean, this wasn't even that long ago, but it was definitely before our kind of phase we're at now, where Hollywood feels like you do need to be really slavish to the source material. And obviously the backlash with Sonic's design kind of like helped kick off this era in some way.
And then the success with the redesign, and everyone was like, Sonic succeeded because it's exactly like the game, even though it's not really at all.
Yeah, that's my point, is like it felt like us in the rooms were the only ones who like particularly cared about. Obviously Sega cared, but they weren't in the room.
And the fans cared, but they were definitely not in the room.
And they didn't even know the movie was happening. So it was like we were just kind of tasked with doing what, you know, in Hollywood would just be like a classic person getting paired with a talking animal. And part of why things ultimately didn't even work out at Sony was that not just Pat and I and Jeff, but, you know, Tim Miller, Neil Moritz, all felt the movie's called Sonic the Hedgehog. He should be the lead. The human is the sidekick. But I think it's hard for Hollywood sometimes, especially before all this, you know, they're like, no, you got to have a movie star human. And Sonic is like E.T. He's like the wacky, weird sidekick.
I mean, that was like the one reference they kind of kept. It's like, it's E.T. And we were like, sort of, except for, you know, E.T. is really about Henry Thomas, this kid.
Right.
It's like, we want Sonic to be the protagonist. And that was even, they sort of assumed it would be Sonic will befriend a kid. And that was kind of like, we had a whole outline where that was the version. And then, I mean, I think Tim Miller was like, what the hell's the point of this kid? And we were like, good point, Tim. Sonic's the kid. We'll pair him with an adult.
It was always a good anytime Tim would come in, he would just be like, we should be chopping people's heads off or whatever. But it was at some point we hit on what we kind of felt was sort of the Little Mermaid version of Sonic, that he'd grown up on Earth. Again, we had this weird paradox to figure out of how he's from another planet, but the whole movie has to be on Earth. And then that started to kind of speak to the idea of like, Sonic is like a kid. I feel like we hit on the road trip thing fairly early, but now I don't even really remember.
That was just to give them stuff to do, really, to have some shape of like why he has to spend time with this human. But really, the characters, it's like a character is defined by what they want and can't have. And Sonic is lonely and he wants the life of like a normal kid that he can see, and he can never have it. That's what makes him so tragic. I mean, we talked about Little Mermaid, we talked about Superman, we talked about Hellboy as sort of like our touchstones of what Sonic's deal was in that first movie. And that gives him something he can want, and then he can get it at the end of the movie.
And I wouldn't even say that we were back to an earlier question of how far ahead we are thinking. In this sense, we weren't, but I think it's a testament that if you're doing source material and you're staying kind of true to the atmosphere, then it will all line up. Is that the whole franchise is about Sonic making friends? You know, it's a found family franchise, so it made sense in the first one. Even though I hope fans like James Marsden. We know that no fan was super. Man, I hope in a Sonic movie he becomes best friends with a human. But it's still, and I think that's also part of why then Tom and Maddie kind of shift into being parents, is that we were bringing in the group of friends, the found sibling family that fans really wanted.
I mean, getting to the second movie, then it's sort of, you have to reevaluate of like, it seems like Sonic got everything he wanted, but what does he still want? He needs some new yearning to really get into this. And in earlier like drafts of Sonic 2, there was even more stuff of how he still has to be secret from the other humans, whatever. He only has Tom and Maddie. We end up kind of breezing through that pretty quickly in the movie. But the idea that he needs, we also do in this case, like, how is this movie going to end? It's going to end with him becoming friends with Tails and Knuckles. So what does he want? He wants some friends who are also superpowered creatures. Ta-da! That way he can get it.
I think another thing you kind of set up that resonated with me is that, okay, Sonic is like obsessed with pop culture because he's been like watching from behind, but then he gets to enact a road trip movie, and then he gets to enact like fight the bad guys with his friends. So he's like playing out the movies that he loves and getting what he wants that way.
That was also, I think, led to the Little Mermaid thing was because, and granted, I don't think kids care about this stuff, but it certainly bugs us watching a movie when a character who knows nothing about Earth or pop culture is just wackily making pop culture references because they're just going for laughs.
Yeah,
So we're kind of trying to think of like, can there be an actual reason that Sonic can be doing pop culture references? And that's because he is an Earthling. He grew up on Earth and has been spying on us the whole time.
Speed reading comics.
Yeah.
Right. So many issues of the Flash. Those are collector's items. Those are old issues. I want to know where he stole. Where did Sonic get those comics? Did he rob a comic?
He probably
collector?
robbed a comic store.
Okay, that's
Bad
Sonic would never do that, Josh. Shame on you.
We have seen he leaves the money behind. He stole
That's
from
right.
the cookies.
But where does he get the money?
That's true.
That he robbed a bank.
Yeah.
That is good.
Well, that's why he keeps on trying to. That's why in the beginning of 2, he stops a bank robbery. He's like, "Well, this will make up for the one I committed before the first film."
He skims a little off the top at the end, and everyone goes home happy.
Then there's the Robotnik of everything, the Jim Carrey, and not the first to remark how remarkable it is that Jim Carrey is doing sequels, trilogies, franchises.
I mean, we can't believe it either. It's crazy. Like it felt natural while it was happening, but then anytime I would look at it objectively, being like, these are the only movies he's making currently. And not like he's never done sequels, but really after Ace Ventura 2, he's never like locked into a franchise while it's still kind of like, fresh. It's more like, oh yeah, I like the Fairley Brothers. I'll do them a solid and do Dumber and Dumber 2 years later.
And there's such an arc that we're seeing play out with him going from, a dick who's like a genius with robots to a guy who's completely lost his mind, and now to playing a double role of 2 increasingly evil geniuses.
Well, knowing that Jim does not like to repeat himself definitely sort of influences, like, we got to throw some real new stuff at him for each movie if we want him to come back. And since Gerald is obviously so central to the Shadow story, I mean, we were just like, what are we doing with Gerald here? And it's like, pretty quickly jump to like, maybe Jim plays 2 characters.
Well, and Tyson knows all about that. Like, there were so many permutations of how to use Gerald. Is Gerald even in the present?
Right.
There was even variations on how he was existing in the present. I do think once the idea that Jim was going to play both characters came about, I think it just kind of, even though I think everyone was also like, oof, this is going to be tricky to shoot, but it was too irresistible. And I think everyone knew that Jim would they ran it by Jim and he did love it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, pretty early on, that idea was floated and the studio just loved it so much. It was like, there's no walking back from it. Like, even we had like Josh was saying, we had many versions of this story, as you always do with any movie before you land on the final one. And a lot of them were not nearly as close to Sonic Adventure 2, simply because of, you can tell Shadow's story in a different way, but there's a lot of things like a space colony just hovering above Earth that nobody noticed for 50 years, for some reason. And all sorts of things that it's easy to believe in a science fiction world where the Sonic games take place. But these movies have always been really about Sonic in our world specifically and why that makes him special, So to suddenly heel turn and say, oh yeah, there's a space colony where people have lived. It's like a second moon. Nobody really comments on it, but they put it up there 50 years ago and it's just been floating around. So there are things that had to change. And so,
yeah, they launched it before Sputnik. I don't know how that's possible, but it was.
And it's funny, when in the early parts of developing this story, I felt like everyone kept making the mistake. It's like, okay, so 50 years ago, there was this World War II thing. We had to be like, World War II was 80 years ago.
But
50 years ago was the 70s, you guys.
This happens a lot, we've realized, now that we're all old. Because, Pat and I on the Zooms would be like, guys, we all have to remember, we're old now. We're thinking of what the movies we watched in the 80s where they were talking about World War II.
Yeah, but there were lots of versions where Gerald wasn't alive. He was kind of a chaos energy ghost that
time ghost, I think we were calling him
like chaos control, has time manipulation elements to it. So the thought was that he got stuck in between time. But yeah, like I said, as soon as the idea of Jim playing both came in, the studio was just like, we need more Gerald. He's got to be there the whole picture, figure out how to make it work.
Well, it always made sense too. I mean, as far as just like Shadow's story, like so much of it in his various games, it's like an elaborate telling of Shadow's backstory where you're, earning flashbacks when you pass levels or whatever. But it's like in a movie, like how many flashbacks do you really want to have? We wanted to like pull some of that story into the present so it can really be happening and pull Gerald into the present. So he isn't a thing that only exists in the past, and give him a chance to interact with Ivo and with Shadow and with Sonic.
And it's always tricky too, because it's like, again, the idea of two Jims, two Robotniks is fun, but it was always also a struggle of like, well, how do we make sure that doesn't completely overshadow Shadow? Also, even with Shadow, even though in the games it feels so different, when you think of it as putting it in to a 100-minute movie, it was also like, well, how do we make sure it doesn't just feel like the Knuckles story again, where a new, furry creature shows up who hates Sonic and then by the end turns out to be noble. And I think having Gerald, like it all kind of like, it melded together nicely to actually feel extremely different than part 2.
Yeah, we didn't want Shadow's thing to be based on a misunderstanding again. I mean, Knuckles, I think had fairly legitimate beef with Sonic actually, but we sort of played it that was a misunderstanding. But like Knuckles and Sonic have great reason to hate each other, really. But that Sonic or Shadow, it's not a misunderstanding, but it is. He's handling it wrong.
I think ultimately it ended up working out for the best. Again, to make the movie feel different from the others, having Gerald there really lets Ivo have an actual deep core to his story. And I know, a couple of guys here haven't seen the movie yet, so I won't spoil anything about it. But Ivo as a character in these movies is a little bit different from the Eggman in the games, where you don't want him to change. You kind of want him to just be the bad guy at the start and the bad guy at the end, because he's going to be the bad guy next time. Like most of the Sonic cast are characters that don't really change throughout the games. Again, because if you're going to make 30 years of them, they can't really grow.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to stay in the same place. It's got to be a little episodic. But in order to kind of justify a movie, you've got to keep things moving or people will check out. And so for this one, I think really what made this movie end up being so special was having Gerald there gave Ivo just so much more to chew on as a character that, it was weird for me as a fan, the idea of keeping him alive, in a story where he was famously killed. But, again, ultimately, I think it landed in a place that really endeared me to the movie version of Robotnik in a way that I don't think could have been possible otherwise. So.
It is funny. I mean, we never called him Ivo until this third movie, right? We never, I don't think we ever said the name in parts 1 or 2, but I mean, Jim Carrey like always had such a concept of Robotnik being so emotionally vulnerable, really. Like all the stuff in the first one, about how he's an orphan and all the which were kind of like throwaway laugh lines, but it's like Jim really thought about it too. He's just like, this is a guy who's like never experienced love. He's incapable of it. And that always sort of stuck in our minds too. So we really wanted to play with that for Ivo in this one and really see what this guy is like and how he can really be hugely emotionally affected by things that somebody else who was a little more well-adjusted would shrug off or not quite fall so easily into certain emotional traps, But
it's very interesting how it's a very different portrayal of Gerald. And I'm glad you brought that up, Tyson. I'm interested also, you're in both worlds. You're the only person in all worlds of Sonic. You're in a very unique position in that way. And were you seeing the Gerald that we see in Shadow Generations and Dark Beginnings? Was that at the same time as like this version, the Paramount version, is being like both kind of growing at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? Like there are in the movie world, not just in the Sonic movie world, but in general in the movie world, there are so many voices at play that are coming to decisions that end up with what you actually see on the screen. And in the game world, it's not that chaotic, honestly. Like Izuka oversees everything. He's the final word on everything. Lots of opinions are coming in, but if he doesn't want to do it, he's not going to do it. And that's the end of it. In the movie world, and again, not just the Sonic movie world, but in the movie world, like the power structure is just very strange. Like I think a lot of people, when they see a movie, they think everything that ends up on the screen, oh, the director did that, or oh, that was written that way, so the writers wrote that. It's really never that black and white. It's truly what ends up in the final picture is an amalgam of many people's thoughts who are heavily invested, both financially and otherwise, in these things. So. And they're also, Jeff is a very collaborative director, so he always hears what people have to say, and that changes how things go. When it comes to how Gerald was portrayed, Jim is a guy that takes a lot of pride in his work. He never half-asses it. I think it would kill him to know that he didn't put it all on the screen in the way that he thought would get the best reaction, get the best laughs. And so when it came to how Gerald is portrayed, a lot of that was Jim's choices as to who this character should be in relation to Ivo, how he's going to relate to him. So, I was seeing all that stuff happen in real time on both sides. And my job is to always say, well, this is how the games are. This is how fans will receive this. You don't have to do what I'm telling you, but it's just like my job is just to inform everyone of what's going on, right? And then so that when they do make decisions, it's educated guesses and not just, oh, we don't actually care what people think. We're just going to go off and whatever, give Gerald like a giant red afro or whatever. Like there are so many decisions that are made to piece all these things together that are just flying in a tornado the entire time until it finally lands on a final picture. But it's everyone is involved in those decisions. It's just it's very it's a lot of voices, and Jeff likes to listen to. So and I think it's for the best, truly. And like what ends up on screen, it ends up so successful because the ideas are coming from anywhere. Best idea wins is the mantra on these.
Yeah, I think if you've got Jim Carrey in a double role, you got to let him cook too, right? Yeah. Whatever he comes up with is probably going to be pretty good.
Well, and I even remember when we first started talking about, maybe Gerald's real important and Jim plays them both. I feel like Jeff was even kind of like, well, yeah, we're going to wait to tell Paramount about this because I think he immediately knew Paramount would be like, yes, and we could never walk it back once that had been said out loud. So we kind of toyed with it a while before it became clear that this will.
It's what I wanted the moment I saw Shadow in the Stinger.
You were already thinking like, ooh, Jim is Gerald.
I was like, okay, Shadow means Gerald, and that means Jim Carrey can play both. Yeah, I saw it all right there.
Josh, you mentioned this earlier. You kind of were bringing this up, but it's a general attitude we see towards not just Sonic, in particular with Sonic, but with all sorts of IP-based movies, that there's the insistence from the audience that it needs to be just like the thing that it's based on. If it's based on a comic book, it needs to be exactly like the comic book, and it can't deviate from that. And I guess what I'm wondering is, you were mentioning the ways that it's positive, gives you some things to build with from the lore for Sonic 3. I would imagine it would be something that also is a bit of a source of frustration, but I'm more wondering what are opportunities that you see for your own individual artistry to be expressed through this giant millions of voices, tons of stakeholders franchise? Like, is it just the involvement itself? Is it like, do you feel like there's a certain thing that you want to be communicating through your work in this?
To your final point there about the stuff that is not the source material, is like, what are we trying to bring to it? Because there's, especially for the third one, so much source material, and Tyson is echoing what he said 100%, that there's so many different voices. I mean, it makes us feel good, even though we know it's a complete lie if fans think like, oh yeah, Josh and Pat made up all the stuff that happened in the movie. It's like, oh yeah, I wish we had that level of power. If anything, I feel like we just present 5 different ideas and then one gets picked, and then that might get changed at some point anyway. But the thing that I feel we always look for is a level of like heart or kind of sadness, like in particular, in the first one, I felt like our two big discoveries on that while we were writing, like we had an outline that was basically everything you know in the movie, a little bit extra because stuff always gets pulled back for budget. And our two big discoveries we found while writing it were, one, the baseball diamond scene, which ended up actually being what you saw ended up being two different scenes that kind of got mushed in to the baseball diamond. Was the idea that demonstrating that Sonic wants friends, but also has superpowers, and what more fun way to do that than him playing a whole baseball team. And then the other thing was his bucket list in the bar fight, and how that plays into Tom seeing the bucket list in like the hotel. And so I feel like that's what Pat and I are trying to, I wouldn't say sneak in, because obviously that's what you want in the movies, but as far as what can we bring to it, since we didn't make up Sonic, and especially again by Sonic 3, it's like we're dealing with so much lore that if anything, it's like you're trying not to fuck it up more than what you can add to it. And so I guess, yeah, again, even though this is coming out after the movie comes out, but since two of you guys haven't seen it, there's a scene involving Agent Stone and Tails that I will say was one of the things we found while writing it that we felt added a bit of the heart we always like to jab in there somewhere.
And really, I think our jobs on these movies is, it's like there's kind of this gigantic list of things that should be in the movie to try and sort of help identify like what we really need, what we don't need, and then how we can hopefully elegantly string these together so we get the maximum amount of stuff people are going to want in a way that mostly makes sense and without a lot of extraneous stuff, like just to create a plan that makes sense for everybody else, like a plan for the movie that, Jeff and Tyson and all there's so many board artists and like more writers who come in after us all working together, but that there is a fairly clear vision of like what the movie is, so nobody gets way off track. And all of these have stayed mostly true to our drafts, but then always there's it's like these two scenes got smushed together and this unbelievably expensive set piece went away. There's always at least one unbelievably expensive set piece that gets cut out of the movie because it was too preposterous. Tyson knows which one I'm talking about.
We always board it.
Yep. No, but these movies, and I think this is probably true with any big movie, but like if anything to us feels more almost like TV. Because like when we did Violent Night, like we made up that idea. We wrote the script. We were the only writers on that. That was also a rare thing where we had to finish a draft super quickly, and drafts always change, but like that also stayed extremely similar to the first draft. This feels more like a show where, we're credited as the writers, as Pat said. There's other writers who come in after us. At some point, they have these big punch-up rooms with, like 10 highly paid people who are there for one day to just throw in jokes. So we noted Tyson's credit is, how do you even credit him? Like, I think that's they keep struggling each time to figure out around union rules what they can call him. But it's like we're all in this big writer's room is how I would use it in TV terms, and kind of with like Jeff and Toby steering the ship. And if anything, it's kind of like you're just trying to make suggestions, and then they get all pieced together into the movie and then change a billion times. And then, best idea always wins out.
I mean, we're all just trying to solve problems. It's like if you find the solution, then you did it. You're doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote from someone that I hope I don't butcher, and I don't remember who even said it, but it's that you write a movie 3 times. You write it once on the page, you write it once on the screen, and then you write it again in the edit.
Mm-hmm.
And as Josh and Pat are saying, it's very true on these things. It's just as you make a thing, as I said earlier, what you think is working absolutely 100% perfectly watertight at any point of the process, as soon as you move on to the next process, you're just like, oh God, the water is peeking through the cracks, and you're just trying to stick your fingers in the holes. So because we have this really unique setup with these movies, we're able to adjust on the fly. I stay around throughout the entire process to facilitate that kind of thing. And a lot of movies don't really have that as part of the process. Like usually you cut your story team and then you're just kind of working with VFX and you're working with your editor to make it all happen. But I board all the way through until like the bitter end on things, because we'll see something not working. Jeff will have another idea. I'll have another idea. And we're quietly remaking the movie all the way through the process to get it to be as good as possible.
I mean, and in these movies especially, it's interesting because, you know, it's like we've got our live action actors, and I don't think we've ever really done any reshoots with them, right? We just stick with what we got on the day. But of course, you can change what the animated characters are saying or doing opposite what you have of the live action actors. Whereas like on a normal live action movie, you'd have to have reshoots if you really want to change anything. I mean, Josh and I used to work in TV animation, and in that we could change literally everything. You know, you do your full animatic, and you're
that
just
was
like,
also real cheap animation, so you really couldn't do
but
it.
We would never change anything once we had the complete animation. We would change stuff just off of the boards and the radio play, but it was so useful because you could really watch it and be like, oh, this isn't funny. We got to fix this part, and then we would. Until we ran out of time and money, and then it was just done. It went on TV, whether it was funny or not.
We remember that show. We still love it. Golan the Insatiable.
Correct.
Yeah, that's right. Fox ADHD.
Right.
Oh, wow, you even remembered the programming block.
Yeah.
We have had a guest on the show who was an animator on that.
Oh, really?
Keith Stack. He was.
Oh yeah. How about that?
I mean, a lot of the Golan the Insatiable crew has ended up over on Sonic. Our editor on Golan in the Insatiable, Al Levine, edited Sonic 3. So
you mentioned the big expensive set pieces. Like the one that stood out to me in movie 2 was Super Sonic fighting the Death Egg robot. Like that pressed all my buttons as a Sonic fan for 30 years, and I could see my then 5-year-old son having the same experience as me. That you nailed that one.
That one really didn't change that much, honestly. It was always about that size, but there were many other ones in the movie that either got cut or got way smaller. Basically every fight with Knuckles.
Yeah,
we boarded King's Ransom worth of really, really cool stuff, and then it comes time to pay for it, and everyone's like, hold on a minute.
Yeah. We were really happy to get the big robot and like the tornado into the movie, like right from the beginning on Sonic 2. Because to me, we were all like, what do we really, really remember from the game Sonic 2? Let's get this in here. The plane, the big robot, we got to do it. And like the way the big robot sequence turned out was so funny to me. Like, especially like that was something that wasn't in the script at all. I don't know where it came from, but when the robot leans over and puts his hands on his knees and is like huffing and puffing.
that was from Jim. Basically, he on the stage came up with this idea, and then we followed through in VFX for it.
That's amazing.
I mean, basically, almost everything you see from Jim has Jim flavoring all over it.
Oh, yeah.
If not entirely rewritten by him.
No, I'm always a little shocked when he says a line. I'm like, oh, I wrote that. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of his unique jokes come right out of him, either pre-planned or on the day. But yeah, I mean, again, he has a lot of pride in the characters. And so he'll always do it the way we scripted it, and then he'll do his version, and it's just most of the time his version is funnier. Go figure, it's Jim Carrey, so he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, we always point that out too. He will ad-lib on set, but actually I don't think as much as people think he does. His what you would call ad-libbing is really just rewriting. Like he comes up with all these ideas of what he wants to do in the scenes, and I mean, I almost feel like there's just like almost a whole other's movie worth of all his different stuff that he tries out. But he puts a lot of thought into it ahead of time.
Steelbook blooper reel confirmed. I
have bought all the Steelbooks so far.
Yeah.
I assume and hope there will be a Sonic 3 Steelbook.
I guarantee there will be a Steelbook. They sell very well. I mean, Sonic stuff always sells better than most people expect. I think as our shoe partners find out every single time, they're like, oh yeah, we'll make like 500 of these. That's enough, right? And then they're gone 5 seconds after they go up on this. Like,
I feel like part 3 is the first one now where I'm really seeing like a big level of like tie-in toys in merch.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I got it on the first one. No one expected much from that one. I was a little more surprised on 2 where I'm like, man, like every dumb other like family movie that comes out, whether it deserves it or not, has some massive toy line or whatever. So I'm very happy with everything I'm seeing popping up online.
Yeah.
With part 3.
I know my kid has all the toys I wish I had when I was his age.
I mean, people show up for them. That's why, 2, you're kind of testing the waters a little bit, like putting out your first full array for the first time. And then they sell really, really well. You're going to just do more of it for 3. That's what I mean. Yeah. I mean, people have shown how much they want this stuff. And so now we can actually put it out there for them.
Let's talk about Shadow a little bit more for movie 3, Keanu Reeves. Perfect casting. I couldn't imagine a better Hollywood A-list actor to come in and voice one of the most iconic Sonic characters. At what point in the process did you find that out? I can't ask you if he was your number one choice, because how could he not be the number one choice? Of course, he's the number one choice.
I think he was the number one choice. I don't remember. I mean, Tyson would know this better than us. At what point it became real that they were actually talking to him? I know in writing it was because of the internet. Like he was.
Yeah, so many people were like,
favorite.
"Oh, Keanu should be Shadow," and I feel like we talking to Jeff and Toby, it was like the internet wants Keanu for Shadow, and I mean, like that makes sense to us.
Yeah, I think everyone was
totally.
like, I mean, I mean that'd be cool. Hopefully, he might want to do it, but
I mean, Shadow was, he was always choice number 1, and for any of the characters, we always go through a lot of deliberation about who's best, who can we get, all that kind of stuff, who's available. With Shadow, it was just hard from the very first line. It's like gotta be Keanu. And then I never heard any other word of any other person being put up for it. So yeah, it's like everyone was just deadlocked on him, and just lucky we got him.
I mean, we already because he's in Sonic 1 as himself when Sonic's watching Speed. And I know that we had to like get his permission to use that clip from Speed, and he signed off on it. So we knew that, he was disposed.
He at least didn't hate Sonic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Keanu Reeves played Sonic prior to signing off on the appearance of his name
he was
in
in
Sonic 1?
His
100%.
early 20s when Sonic first came out, I like to think.
Yeah, I think so too.
He's in the green rooms. He's in the trailers. Yeah, he's played.
Do you think he got all A ranks in Shadow the Hedgehog the game? That's what
Do you think he unlocked Green Hill Zone in Sonic Adventure 2?
I hope so.
I think he did most of the branches of the story in Shadow 05, but he didn't get all.
He didn't get to the end. He gave up.
Yeah.
He's like, I got enough, for my performance. Okay. He probably downloaded a Chow editor for SA2. That's how we got Green Hill.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I would love if it turned out Keanu was like some mega supersonic nerd.
You've seen probably some of the like headlines that have come out of like in his interviews. He's talking about like, I did this, or Jeff Fowler was saying he's done a bunch of research for the character. So some YouTuber who put together a compilation of the scenes, or he played through the game himself. I don't know, but he did the research.
I mean, all of our guys put a lot of research into it. As soon as they get the role, I mean, I think they know just how much people care about this stuff. Idris has done plenty of research on Knuckles. I mean, Colleen, obviously, you don't even need to comment on.
Yeah.
But Ben as well. They all do their reading. And then they come to us and say, is this important? And then if something's in the script, they're like, well, I don't know. Like Idris had thoughts on whether Knuckles should be scared of ghosts or not. Like they really, they care about their characters. They're not just showing up, reading lines and leaving. Every single one of them actually cares.
Did Idris not want to be scared of ghosts? Is that what we're learning here?
No, it wasn't that he didn't want it. He was concerned over whether Knuckles would be or not, in his character. So it was just.
Wait, is that from Pat and I were just talking about this? Then I think we looked it up.
Yeah, we couldn't remember if we got that from somewhere or if we just made him scared of ghosts because it seemed funny.
But I think we got it from somewhere, right? Like that's.
I hope your source is the Sonic Adventure 2 rap. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
It's a thing that's come up a couple times.
He fights a ghost in SA2.
It's not deadlocked canonical, but
it is now, baby.
But it is a popular fan theory.
I was like, I feel like we got that from like a Knuckles wiki page or something.
It's open to interpretation, but I personally think it's funny, and charming even that Knuckles is this guy that he can take down anything. He's so strong, but you can't punch a ghost, like, so it's an interesting, like, it's always nice to have the tough guy have his one Achilles heel. Knuckles really doesn't have much else. So having him just be a little
extra concerned about ghosts. We'll say it that way.
Yeah.
We're almost at time, so going to ask you the impossible question that you can't answer, but I'll bury within it a question that you can answer. So the question that you can't answer is, what can you tell us about what are the next steps for, like, so, some would say that Sonic Adventure 2, that's the pinnacle of the Sonic stories, like that you've got to be pretty creative and clever to like start combining stuff, look to the comics, look to other sources after this. So what are we looking at? Who are we going to see in the next movies? You can't answer that. But what you can answer is, what was your involvement with the Knuckles series?
Well, they were doing the scripts for Knuckles while we were writing Sonic 3, so we were not involved. Tyson was, though, so he can talk.
Yeah, I mean, Knuckles was being made at the exact same time Sonic 3 was. I started on Knuckles leading the story department over there, and then I had to hop off as soon as 3 started. So a lot of the actual middle part of Knuckles is a mystery to me. I hopped back over once we were in final animation, so that I could make sure we were staying on model and hitting all his character notes and stuff. But it's incredible that show came out looking as good as it did when we basically made an entire movie worth of stuff that looks pretty much like movie quality while we were filming another movie. And it was a lot of stuff going on at one time. Unfortunately, because I was split between the two of them, my focus is always on the movies. They're the star. They're going to carry everything. So I had to hop over pretty early on in the process.
Yeah, but when we visited the set in London of Sonic 3, I remember like Toby Asher was who's only on set like every other day, because I think that was when they were super deep in posting all the episodes.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was mostly the same core creative team doing two things at once, So it was, it's something that I think is really kind of interesting and nice about these movies is we have had almost the same creative team at the top level anyway for all 3. And that's really uncommon. Like we've had our VFX supervisor for all 3 movies. He's never wanted to go do anything else. We've had our writers for 3 movies. We've had, we got our animation director back from Sonic 1 for Sonic 3 because he was just dying to come back. I've been here. Jeff's been here. Our producers have all been here. Toby and Neil. It's like normally in movie world, you hop off and you go somewhere else and you're just like, it's really rare to have everyone want to come back every time. But the thing you'll hear from basically anyone working on these movies is that it's some kind of magical serendipity that we're entirely staffed by nice people that all like each other. There's not that one asshole, that like, oh God, we got to keep him around or whatever. It's like everyone just really gets along really, really well. And nobody wants to do anything other than keep making these movies.
Yeah, the Sonic 3 set was one of the calmest sets I think we've ever been on. Yeah, we couldn't
believe it. Part of that, I think, was it was in England, and I've heard that they're just the crews there have a slightly different vibe than the crews here. But I also think it's a testament to, at this point, what a well-oiled machine it really is. Even like the fact that watching them do the Gerald Ivo stuff and Jim's like schedule, they all had worked out perfectly, and like he wanted, his doubles that he's playing against were also in full prosthetics. It was just, it seemed so complicated when you thought about it. When you were just standing there looking at it, it seemed like the most blasé, just like, whatever, we're all just showing up and hanging out. And at some point, Jeff will be like, all right, action. Not to imply that the other ones were chaotic, but
we have certainly been on some other film sets that were far more chaotic.
But I think it's what Tyson was saying, because I think it is because of the same, especially on the crew level.
Yeah.
It's been fun for us to keep coming back. But like, as far as the shooting of the movie part, that it's kind of all these same people who already have these relationships. And I don't know if Tyson wants to talk about it, but I know the stuff that changed on this one, as far as like how you do the actual like animation and what an extra level of control you all had over it to streamline just all the facets, even like in post and marketing and, posters and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's we definitely had a very unique process on this one that was different from not just our previous movies, but
all movies,
most other movies. Like, so on Sonic 2, you know, because we ran into the difficulties of putting all your eggs in one basket per se by having one VFX vendor, we wanted to try a different approach where, okay, if one of our vendors runs into some trouble and they get slowed down or stopped up, we can still keep moving forward on other parts of the movie with other partners, with other vendors. And so for this one, we ran the movie as if we were the VFX vendor. We had animators in-house. We made the assets for the characters, or remade them rather, all internally, so that we actually own the assets and then we give them out to our partners. And it requires you doing more management on the production side, but in the end you get a lot better result out of it, because you're able to give people leeway if they're having a hard time, because you're not sitting there focusing and waiting on just nothing coming in. You've got other stuff to do. The other people are delivering their stuff. You'll get back to these other people. And we had our own internal animation director, that again, because he did so great on Sonic 1. It was a really unique process that is all the brainchild of our VFX supervisor, Ged Wright, who I don't know if a lot of people know what a VFX supervisor's job really is. It's the most insane job I've ever seen in my life. I don't know how any of them live through a movie. It's so much work and it's so much managing. You are basically the one responsible in a VFX heavy movie like this for making sure the entire movie is done. You're communicating across all departments. It's a lot. And so, he came up with this process that we could get things done way faster. All our marketing materials were done internally this time, without getting too sappy or whatever. I'm so grateful for Ged, because he's just this incredible guy that I don't think many people really know just how important of a person in the process is. He'll never show up on a magazine or anything like that. But VFX supervisors are incredible people. And so, having him along for all three, there's no way this movie would have gone nearly as smoothly if we had to have a new VFX supervisor suddenly learn all the rules for how to handle these characters. He'll, in animation reviews, he'll know that you don't do this with Sonic's eyes, or you don't do this with the teeth, like all that other stuff. If we were constantly cycling, it would slow us down so much.
Yeah. And you asked about Sonic 4. I mean, obviously we can't declare that whether there's a Sonic 4 or not, but if there is one, I can tell you the logline for it.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
An unusually fast hedgehog has an incredible adventure.
God damn it.
Wait, are you reading that off something?
I'm reading it off my mind, Josh.
No. I didn't know you did that with your eyes when you were just thinking.
That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
Because you're the writer. Yeah. All right. Tyson, you came into this. You started as fan to Archie, Sega, Paramount. Pat and Josh, you both were casually aware of Sonic, but now both of you have been knee, if not waist, if not neck deep in the Hedgehog and all his hedgehogness, whatever that means. So after everything that the three of you have gone through, how do you think it'd feel about Sonic after everything?
You guys can go first.
We always it was funny again at that Sony era where, Toby was keeping the good fight going to keep the project alive. And Pat and I coming on with Jeff, I know the story Pat tells a lot was after we got the job and we told one of our friends here in LA, it was like, oh, we're writing a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And he said, why? At first we were like, fuck you. I don't know, but we need a job for one thing. What are you talking about? Why? But it felt like we were the only ones who got that the character was cool. And again, not talking about people who are mega fans, but even just looking at the character. Mm-hmm. And we were of the Genesis age, so we played Sonic 2 in particular endlessly when it came out, and just Mario games are so fun, and obviously Mario is a delightful, beloved character, but it's like Mario's Mickey Mouse, Sonic's Bugs Bunny. Like, and also it was just like the idea of like, how do you turn Sonic into a movie? And we were just like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's like, how don't you turn
What are
Sonic
you
into a
talking
movie?
about?
He's a superpowered dude with an arch foe. It's like they're going to have a fight. We build off of that, but it's not hard to see where there's a movie there.
Yeah, when you put your controller down in the Genesis game, he would eventually look over at you and tap his foot because he got bored. And we kind of felt like, in the 16-bit era where it was hard to infuse much personality in your little character, I thought Sega did a great job with just that little bit of minimal animation of really summing up the character.
But I mean, yeah, this movie really changed our careers and changed our lives too. So it's like, I mean, and getting a whole trilogy of it is pretty wild. I feel like this has succeeded beyond anything we could have foreseen at that time. And it put us on the map, and it allowed us to make Violent Night. So, man, I love Sonic. I'll always love it.
Yeah, he has Tyson's picture hanging behind him there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you both have Sonic over your shoulders, and
That's right.
thing that the viewers can't see.
You've got a couple Sonics, Plush Sonic, and I'm not sure exactly. Is that an ad for what? Sonic?
It's a mug.
Oh,
the
yeah,
mug?
it's a German ad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Sonic 2, yeah.
It's funny, too, because when I got it and I translated, I just assumed that it said the beginning of a fast friendship because it's Sonic, but it's the beginning of a long friendship. And I was like, what?
Oh,
Come on, Germany. Missed opportunity there.
sleep at the wheel.
This is it's such a complicated answer, and I want to do the producer thing and be like, oh, it's a dream come true, and I can't wait to have more fast adventures with Sonic on the road. like all those things are true. But I always keep it 100 with stuff like this, and it's like I'm still as big a Sonic fan as I ever have been. Like nothing has changed with that, and it is true. Like everything that's happened to me over the past few years, it's 100% a dream come true. But when your dream comes true, it's not exactly ever going to be what you thought it would be, and then now what? Is this kind of the problem? It's like I've achieved every goal I ever wanted in life already, and like now what? No, it's an interesting thing that I'm traversing, and it's a very existential kind of moment for me, where it's like what if you got to direct a Star Wars movie? Then what? Like imagine your favorite thing in the entire unit. For most of us here, it's Sonic, but like for anyone else out there, like what's your 100% favorite thing in the entire world? You loved your entire life. Your walls are plastered with this shit. You got figures all over your room. It's like, what if you were in charge of that? I think the romantic version in your head, you think, oh, well, I'd be on cloud 9. It's like everything, I would get everything I ever wanted. But reality is that when you see the sausage being made, you're always thinking of the guts. And so it's become something now that I have to approach from a much more analytical mindset I have, like any Sonic fan, I have lots of opinions on what's good about Sonic and what's bad about Sonic. But I'm in the position now where my job is not necessarily to just do that. And moreover, I can't do that. Like people won't let me do that, and they shouldn't, because you should never just let anyone do what they want. But also, I feel like I have this great responsibility as a fan still to represent the fans. And sometimes that means going against my own interests, because I know it's what most people will want, even if I don't want it. But it's never just simple. I guess being in this position, it doesn't change the fact that I'm incredibly grateful for it. Like I wouldn't change a thing, like absolutely not. But it's a very, very weird situation to be in that I don't think many people on the planet have really can really relate to, so it's I mean, again, I hope we just keep getting to make this, and if not this, more Sonic stuff for forever. I never want him to go away. And I don't think if at this point I'm still a fan, I'll always be a fan. I would have been snuffed out on Mania Adventures if I had any doubt in my mind.
It is funny. Tyson's right, but yeah, like when it seems like you're living the dream career wise, it also generally means that you're more stressed out than you've ever been in your entire life, and that's just that's kind of how you're living. That's the game.
We see the effort that goes into it. Like Tyson, your era, going official with Sega, like it brought me back in. I was out since Heroes, and I'm back as deep in as I ever was. I can share it with my kid. It's a thing we do every day. Like it's very meaningful to me, my entire life, and all this special meaning now. So you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely like you are in a very unique position, Tyson, being in the one Sonic person that even like Azuka-san or any other, like nobody else is really quite in this. It's a very unique position. But at the same time, you were also a guy that's on the Sonic message boards. We were arguing on Sonic Retro, which David runs. So it's like, we've all sort of been like rooting for your kind of involvement with this. And then Pat, I met doing crappy open mics in Los Angeles. I got to meet Josh via that. And then I remember you telling me about the Sonic assignment when we were getting breakfast once and being like, oh my God, Sonic the Hedgehog is going to give you just a little taste of how rad.
Yeah, you didn't ask us why we wanted to make a Sonic movie.
I was the one person who was like, you have to just hold on for dear life.
As a quick interjection, if you don't care enough to fight on a message board, you don't care enough to have the job.
Beautiful.
I will say, Tyson, when I see you still post on Retro, I'm just like, you must have the patience of a saint to engage with anyone still on that website.
He's won the respect of the guys on the message board, but at what cost?
I mean, it is really difficult knowing the things and still trying to communicate patiently and politely with people that are living in a world that isn't full of the knowledge that you have. But again, it's all I can do is I can think about how I was 5 years ago. Yeah. I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew exactly how to fix this franchise. I thought if I got in there, surely I would just have my way. I'd say this and it'd be done. And it's like, that's who I was 5 years ago. So when I'm talking to a bunch of people that are still there, all I can do is think, well, that's me before this.
Right.
And I want to be able to share the knowledge that I can without ever feeling like I'm suddenly on a different authority plane or I'm better than them. And it's not. It's like, yes, I know more things, but that doesn't make me a more important fan, So.
Except for in your case, you kind of are, because you're the voice of the fans to the people who join the franchise.
But it is true. There's things and characters that we keep trying to get in every movie, and we don't have the power to just decide whatever is in there. Neither does Tyson. I mean, even Jeff and Toby can't just do whatever they want.
But wouldn't this all be better if there was a sexy bat hanging around?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Movie 4, movie 5.
They're all about her.
Movie 6, movie 7. This is the new James Bond.
You could pivot.
Yeah, Rouge is the franchise.
I mean, it is funny just the Sonic fan base being so rabid and so opinionated, but somehow I know there's factions out there who are mad at movie Sonic for existing and mad about various things, but I feel like for the most part we've gotten a lot of those fans on board and understanding that the movies aren't exactly like the games, aren't exactly like the comics, and that these can all exist. And I feel like we've gotten pretty lucky with the fan response. I mean, all the way from just the second trailer to the first movie, when we came back with Tyson's new design, it won us so much goodwill and kind of saved the whole thing. Somehow that little do-si-do of the bad trailer and then the good trailer miraculously catapulted us to a whole movie trilogy.
Yeah. I feel like the right people are working on it for sure. Oh. I love what also, I didn't mean to step on whoever was just talking. Sorry, I don't know who that was, but I love also what Josh was saying earlier too about you guys were believing in that it was cool the whole time. And also Sonic doesn't belong to anybody. He's a spirit. Mary Garnett invented him in a children's book.
That's right.
Just kidding. That's not really real.
No, it's very real. She's real. I met her once.
But yeah, I mean, you got like there was a time like not terribly long ago where the sort of online or the like consensus among like game media observers was like this was a franchise on its way out. Now it's resurgent, stronger than ever, more popular than ever, with no signs of stopping. And it's the most exciting time to be a fan. And that's kudos to you guys as well as the team and everybody. So it's very exciting.
I can say, as someone that was at Sega before the movies came out and is still working at Sega after the movies came out, it's a different world. It's truly. I mean, you can look at everything coming out from the franchise now. In any respect, it's being done better than it was.
We could see it.
It's because these movies have really, for whatever parts of it deviate from what the hardcore want, it's bringing in a whole new audience of fans that is giving a real push to make Sonic as great as he can be. Like this animated series that came out just recently, the Shadow Dark Beginnings, it's phenomenal. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was great.
When I started making cartoons over there, we were making them in a cave with rocks. It was truly, I had to paint my own BGs on Sonic Mania Adventure. Wow. The director shouldn't be doing that. I had to do a couple of the animation retakes. I had to, oh my God. It was an insane way to make cartoons, but all that stuff is built to where we are now, and so I think that's my most important perspective as a fan that I hope I can communicate to all the other fans, that it's difficult with a 30-year franchise to always get what you want. But if something is coming out that you're not 100% copacetic with, I hope at least you can appreciate how it's lifting up this thing you love so much in the effort that you're going to get what you want, because now we actually have the power to do it. So I think Sonic Shadow Generation shows it. Dark Beginning shows it. Frontier shows it. I really think Sonic has a very, very bright future, in a way that almost seems unthinkable, just a few years ago.
And we're sorry he doesn't have one giant eyeball with two pupils. It looked weird.
I mean, he should just be an eye, not anything else.
Well, we are at time. Thank you very much, Pat, Josh, Tyson, Josh, Pat, Tyson, Pat. Okay, you guys, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And everybody go see movie 3.
Go see movie 3.
Hell yeah.
Do it.
Well, okay, so yeah, here's the post show. Our guests are wrapped, and now it's time for the outro.
Yeah,
the outro.
Whoa.
Your favorite part of the show, my favorite part of the show. Means we're done. It also means we get to hear this song and David.
Whoa, that's right. You get to hear that song. You get to hear me. I know some people come on here to hear about Sonic. They hear about Sonic from people directly involved with Sonic. All of our guests have met Sonic, shook his hand. Shook Tails' tails, because Tails doesn't use his hands. He would use his tails, of course he would. Look, I don't know, usually I do a segue that never actually meshes with the phrase, you've listened to another episode of Sonic Weekly, and there's no reason to change that this go around. But if you enjoyed this deep dive into the making of the Sonic movie trilogy, well, if you haven't already, this is the perfect time for you to subscribe to the podcast using your podcatcher of choice, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or if you're part of the Android faithful, Podcast Addict. Oh yeah. You can give us a review, give us a rating, do all of those fancy things. Whoa, that's Podcast Addict. It's going, it's live. I see it. Wow, everyone is stunned into silence, even our guests that are still totally here. But if you refuse all podcatchers, we are also over on YouTube at Sonic-Weekly, where you can like, comment, and subscribe to your heart's desire. And we've got video, gameplay footage from friend of the show, Jack of Old Games. And this will also have it. Who knows what the game was? I bet you enjoyed it. If you want to reach the show, of course, email us, sonicweeklypodcast@gmail.com. Drop us a line. We do the mailbag. Couldn't do it this week, of course, too jam-packed. But we'll be sure to crack it open somewhat soon, if not in the new year. Yeah, you want to email us? That's also how you get the link to our Discord server where you can talk to like-minded Sonic the Hedgehog fans about many things, including, Sonic the Hedgehog. You can also get the link to that Discord through another way if you want to support the show outside of just what you can do for free. If you want to help support financially, we have a Ko-fi.
Coffee.
Right.
Ko-fi.
You can buy
us a coffee.
Right. Ko-fi.
Coffee,
you can Ko-fi. I think it's fee. You can,
Ko-fi?
throw a tip into the
Like it's because it's no fee.
no fee.
And it's coffee
Uh-huh.
because it's buy me a coffee. But it looks like Ko-fi, like lo-fi.
Right. Look, it's a confusing name, but we don't care about the name. What you do is you can log on to there, you can throw something into the tip jar, or you can become one of our executive producers, $5 a month, just like Pig Dan, Papsy, Sonic Do Saving Throws, and Cal, not or Cal. It's all 5 of them. Hey, you also get some exclusive goodies from a wife of the Grant Ashland. Whoa, it'll show up in your mail box. Gotta thank again our guests, Pat Casey, Josh Miller, and Tyson Hesse. They are the terrific trio, their own Team Sonic, as it were. Look at them go. I don't know who would be speed, power, or flight, and they are too stunned in silence to answer that themselves right now. Of course, gotta thank Smoovies for the edit, making sure that we, don't accidentally spoil the plot of Sonic 4. Cut that part out, sorry. And gotta thank Bo. Welcome back, Bo. We didn't say welcome back. You weren't here last couple weeks.
Welcome back, Bo.
Thank you.
We'll check in with Rings of Saturn soon.
Yes, thank you for coming.
It's in the link. It's in the description.
Thank
I
you
know
for
you
coming.
guys are excited about Skeleton Wars, that 1990s media franchise that we all come here to celebrate.
And of course, thank you, Grant, for all that you do, securing such great guests, leading us in such great discussion. Like, we would be lost without you. We would have just stared at the three of them and gone, Sonic good.
No, you guys are great. Thank you, David. Thank you, Bo. You are what makes it possible. And thank you, dear listener, for making it worthwhile. See you next time. Bye-bye.